How's it going, everyone? Events editor Eric Eisenberg here, just a couple of days removed from the absolutely massive Marvel Studios panel at San Diego Comic-Con, where, of course, they just announced the entire Phase 4 slate. Obviously, there is a ton of news that has come out of that panel, but today we are specifically going to focus on one of those titles, namely Chloe Zhao's The Eternals, which is going to be the second film of the Phase 4 Marvel Cinematic Universe, and we have a lot to discuss because this is a complicated, big, and awesome project. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications because we have a ton of awesome videos coming your way in the next days, months, years, everything, so stay tuned. As I mentioned, this is going to be the second film of Phase 4. It is going to be the project that follows Black Widow, which is going to be coming out in May of 2020. This one is going to be out in theaters on November 6, 2020, and it's going to present a whole new side of the Marvel Cinematic Universe that we have never seen before. This is a very complex, complicated, cosmic story that also ties into the history of Earth, so there's a lot to get into, so let's dive in.
Something entirely new, entirely different for the MCU, a group of immortals who've been on Earth for 35,000 years. They've been there amongst the MCU. We haven't met them before. This film is full Jack Kirby.
The story of the Eternals begins in the 1970s when creator Jack Kirby, who is one of the most influential legendary figures at Marvel Comics, did a bit of a back and forth with the competition. At that time, he decided to take a spell over at DC Comics, and while he was there, created this big, gigantic story about gods and otherworldly adventures and all these various different planets called Fourth World. Unfortunately, that series got canceled. Eventually, though, Jack Kirby came back to Marvel, and that's when he got the opportunity to kind of do something similar. Hence, we get the Eternals. It is a kind of different story, but it does tie into kind of these larger-than-life, mythology-driven, big cosmic stories, and it's full of aliens and gods and these absolutely gigantic, interesting, and complex things that only Jack Kirby could have come up with, and it should fuel one hell of a blockbuster. So who are the Eternals? Well, it actually ties deep into humanity's history and actually goes back centuries, because originally, at the dawn of man, these godlike cosmic beings known as the Celestials visited Earth and did some experiments on proto-humanity. The result was 3 different branches of evolution. One of those was humanity, which of course is everyday people like you and me, but the second of those was called the Eternals. I'll get into the third in a minute. The Eternals are these kind of like beings of unbelievable perfection. They have this ability to channel cosmic energy, which actually, as their name implies, essentially turns them into immortals. They are incredibly hard to kill, like crazy hard to kill, to the point where they can be called Eternals, and you know, it makes sense. Part of their gifts are that they are actually able to channel their cosmic energy into various different areas. For example, Icarus, who is going to be one of the main characters in the Eternals movie, channels into his heightened senses. Of course, each one of them turns into an individual and has their own specific adventure that builds this larger community known as the Eternal. One detail that Kevin Feige mentioned during the Hall H panel is the fact that the Eternals have actually been on Earth for 35,000 years. And in that time, and this is actually a part of the comics that is fascinating, is they actually influenced a lot of the different mythologies that people believe in to this day. For example, there's the story of Noah's Ark, which is kind of given a new spin in Marvel Comics in that it actually turns out to be a battle between the Eternals' evil cousins and the Celestials that causes this gigantic flooding on Earth. And as it turns out, Icarus, one of the main characters in the Eternals, is the dove that leads Noah's Ark, this wooden ship full of animals and humans, to safety. So it's stuff like that that is kind of manipulated and changed within the Marvel Universe. You can see it in characters' names like Athena, who is very close to Athena, Circe, who you may recognize from the Odyssey, and elements like that that lead into a larger understanding of mythology and way things work, and it's crazy cool. Clearly, there are a lot of Eternals, and that means building an ensemble cast, but fortunately, Marvel Studios has already done a fantastic job building a really cool crew of actors for this film. I mentioned Icarus earlier. He's going to be brought to life by Robb Stark from Game of Thrones, Mr. Richard Madden. I mentioned Athena earlier. She is going to be played by the absolutely legendary Angelina Jolie, making her debut in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Then there is Kumail Nanjiani, star of Silicon Valley and getting extremely buff for the role, who's going to be playing Kingo in the movie. You have the leader of the Eternals, who is also the contact between their group and the godlike Celestials, named Ajak, who's going to be played by Salma Hayek. Walking Dead star Lauren Ridloff is going to be in the movie, and she's going to be playing Mercury, who is a speedster member of the Eternals, who uses her cosmic energy to go incredibly fast. Tyree Henry just recently had a dabble in the world of Marvel Comics, having a very key role playing Jefferson Davis in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. He is going to be playing Phastos in the movie. Don Lee, if you don't know about him, you should check out Train to Busan. It's a Korean zombie movie that is absolutely awesome, and he is really the standout star. He is going to be playing Gilgamesh in the upcoming film. And finally, we have Leah McHugh, who is a child actor going to be playing Sprite, a very old elder Eternal. However, she looks like a little girl, so no twist on that. There are a few people and characters in this larger world and story that have not been revealed just yet, and that actually includes an entire race of beings. Earlier in this video, I mentioned that the Celestials use proto-humanity to branch off 3 evolutions. One is humanity, one is the Eternals, the other is the Deviants, which, from their name, you can probably tell that on the DNA spectrum, they're not really doing fantastically. In fact, they're kind of defined by just complete chaos in their DNA. Each generation looks completely different, and more than that, they all kind of look monstrous and horrible. Just because of their lot in life, they are like kind of almost banished to a kingdom underneath the sea. They don't really love being kind of treated as the third fiddle below both humanity and the Eternals, so there's kind of a lot of anger and resentment there that causes them to lash out a lot, and they tend to cause a lot of problems for the Eternals community. We'll have to wait and see how they are actually presented. As I mentioned, they have not yet cast any of these major characters just yet. The Eternals also does an excellent job continuing a tradition of sorts for Marvel Studios, in that the filmmaker behind it is not a big blockbuster director that everybody knows. Instead, it is a filmmaker named Chloe Zhao who is going to be making her debut blockbuster with this movie, and in fact, it is actually only the 3rd feature film that she has made. It is something that is very much part of Marvel Studios history at this point. Of course, James Gunn, before directing the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, was really best known for these really micro-budget horror films. The Russo brothers were best known as producers of shows like Community and Arrested Development, before going on to not only do the 2nd and 3rd Captain America movies, but also the absolutely massive Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. So, you know, Marvel Studios, they can find that talent. They find those diamonds in the rough, and it seems that Chloe Zhao is the latest director to go on this path. Her last film was this movie called The Rider, which is this kind of modern western following a rodeo rider who experiences a massive injury and literally has to learn how to get back on the horse. It is an absolutely beautifully shot film, which gives me extremely high expectations for what to expect from the Eternals as it brings to life this kind of Jack Kirby aesthetic, but it's also deeply dramatic, deeply emotional, and it makes me expect a lot from the character relationships. There is obviously still a lot more to learn about the Eternals. This film is still a few months away from starting production. It's still more than a year away from release, and of course we are staying up to date with all of those details. So as mentioned, please subscribe, please turn on notifications, because we have tons of awesome videos coming your way.
Playing Thena, Angelina Jolie.